I want to ask you. You live up here. You don't live in Colorado Springs. You live up here, and you cover all of the all of the Colorado teams that are housed in Denver, including the Broncos. What do you make of the moves the Broncos did make, the moves the Broncos didn't make? Do you like what they did this offseason?
I think they picked a good time to not be active in free agency. I saw a lot of teams, especially in the NFC or AFC West, that probably overspent for some guys that weren't worth the money that they gave them. My concern with watching the last 3 years of free agency, if the Broncos had been in that position to be able to spend money, they probably or maybe would have spent it on players that were overpriced at their price tag. So if you're going to pick a year to be John Elway and not be active in free agency, this was probably it.
Yeah, except the window is closing. The window's closing, and you need offensive linemen. So I would respectfully disagree with you, Mr. Klee, since you're calling me Mr. Paige. But the teams that are spending, yes, they're overspending, but Raiders had $50 million to spend. I mean, they had a ton of money. There are teams, Jacksonville had a ton of money. You're going to have to spend it because you've got to get to the salary cap. You can't be $30 million under. I mean, you can be somewhat and carry over part of that, but that's the way teams rebuild. And I just think Kansas City, even though they lost a great center, they lost some people. They've lost a lot of people the last 2 years. Kansas City's going to be a little bit better team. I think San Diego's going to be a very good team. And they got Orlando Franklin. Their biggest problem was pass protection last year sounded like echoing what the Broncos had, pass protection for Phillip Rivers.
You can't spend wantonly every year. I mean, especially if you have to lock guys into 2- and 3-year deals. You just can't make big splashes every single year. This seems to be the year where John Elway has to make the value picks in free agency and has to just fill holes because he's made such big splashes in previous years.
Well, I would ask you and Paul, though. God, that sounds less Paul. Hey, I would ask you, and I wrote this on Sunday, would you rather have Julius Thomas or would you rather have the 4 guys that they got? Because they cost the same. So 4 for 1 plus a compensatory draft.
Well, see, let me just take Julius Thomas versus Owen Daniels, okay? Number one, I don't trust that Julius Thomas is going to be able to stay on the field. Number two, I think Peyton Manning will play up, like we talk about coaching up players. Peyton Manning will play up Owen Daniels, and he'll go from a 45-catch guy to a 65 or 70-catch guy because that's what Peyton Manning does with guys. That's what Peyton Manning did with Julius Thomas.
I can't see Owen Daniels catching 75 catches anywhere.
Pretty good pass catcher.
What we're going to find out is what did the last 2 drafts produce? And you had an offensive line that really broke down and cratered about week 8 or week 9, whenever we were in St. Louis back then. And you had a tackle taken early in the draft last year that was never active. Now, you also have a corner, Bradley Roby, who looks like he might be a player from the same draft. That's a position you can't have too many guys. And you have a guy in Cody Latimer who there's a chance you're going to lose Demaryius Thomas. So you're going to see 3 guys at 3 key positions that you're going to need players. I think this is when we find out if that was a good draft or if John Elway butchered that draft.
Yeah, and Paradiso.
There you go.
He was not even, he was cut and then was brought back to the practice squad. He never saw the light of day last year, if you will. John Elway had a great draft, his first one, because now those guys are off, going off to other teams. His drafts since then have been sort of lacking, but it's pretty easy to draft Von Miller. John really, of all the stuff he does, I know this having been around him for 35 years, he wants so badly to be like his father and be a great evaluator of talent. That Jack was a great evaluator of talent, both as a coach and then when he was in the personnel department here. And John really wants to make his late father proud that I became like my father. And so I think it rides at him that maybe his drafts haven't been, and I think they actually pushed to keep those guys around rather than, they've only dumped, he's drafted 29 players and only 4 of them have gone away. Vince Painter was, and that's not bad because other teams get rid of draft draft picks. They tend to so you wonder whether these guys are any good or whether he wants to push to have as many of his drafted players on the squad.
We'll find out. We'll find out this year probably.
But you're right about Cody Latimer, because I saw John. I went in to pick up something, press pass for a road game, a parking ticket or something, and I was walking out, and this guy said, "Woody," and so it was John talking to somebody. He came over to me, and I said, "How would you describe this receiving core?" "I think it's the best we ever had, but I can't get my guy on the field. I'm going to get my guy on the field." He went off. It was like he had just sought me out to say, "You should write about Cody Latimer getting on the field." So he's intent about those guys playing for him.